Section 3 of Childe Harold's Pilgrimage by George Gordon Lord Byron. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Canto the Third. 1. Is thy face like thy mother's, my fair child? Ada, sole daughter of my house and heart. When last I saw thy young blue eyes, they smiled, and then we parted, not as now we part, but with a hope. Awaking with a start, the waters heave around me, and on high the winds lift up their voices. I depart, whither I know not, but the hours gone by, when Albion's lessening shores could grieve or glad mine eye. 2. Once more upon the waters, yet once more, and the waves bound beneath me as a steed that knows his rider, welcome to their roar. Swift be their guidance, wheresoe'er it lead. Though the strained mast should quiver as a reed, and the rent canvas fluttering strew the gale, still must I on, for I am as a weed, flung from the rock, on ocean's foam, to sail where'er the surge may sweep, the tempest's breath prevail. 3. In my youth's summer I did sing of one, the wandering outlaw of his own dark mind. Again I seize the theme, then but begun, and bear it with me, as the rushing wind bears the cloud onwards. In that tale I find the furrows of long thought and dried up tears, which, ebbing, leave a sterile track behind, or which all heavily the journeying years plod the last sands of life, where not a flower appears. 4. Since my young days of passion, joy or pain, perchance my heart and harp have lost a string, and both may jar. It may be, that in vain I would essay as I have sung to sing. Yet, though a dreary strain, to this I cling, so that it wean me from the weary dream of selfish grief or gladness. So it fling forgetfulness around me, it shall seem to me, though to none else, a not ungrateful theme. 5. He who, grown aged in this world of woe, in deeds not years piercing the depths of life, so that no wonder waits him, nor below can love or sorrow, fame, ambition, strife, cut to his heart again with the keen knife of silent, sharp endurance, he can tell why thought seeks refuge in lone caves, yet rife with airy images and shapes which dwell, still unimpaired, though old, in the soul's haunted cell. 6. 'Tis to create, and in creating live, a being more intense, that we endow with form our fancy, gaining as we give the life we image, even as I do now. What am I? Nothing, but not so art thou, soul of my thought, with whom I traverse earth, invisible but gazing, as I glow, mixed with thy spirit, blended with thy birth, and feeling still with thee in my crushed feelings' dearth. 7. Yet must I think less wildly, I have thought too long and darkly, till my brain became, in its own eddy boiling and o'erwrought, a whirling gulf of fantasy and flame. And thus, untaught in youth my heart to tame, my springs of life were poisoned. 'Tis too late, yet am I changed, though still enough the same in strength to bear what time cannot abate, and feed on bitter fruits without accusing fate. 8. Something too much of this, but now 'tis past, and the spell closes with its silent seal. Long absent Harold reappears at last, he of the breast which fain no more would feel, wrung with the wounds which kill not, but ne'er heal. Yet time, who changes all, had altered him in soul and aspect as in age, years steal fire from the mind as vigour from the limb, and life's enchanted cup but sparkles near the brim. 9. His had been quaffed too quickly, and he found the dregs were wormwood, but he filled again, and from a purer fount, on holier ground, and deemed its spring perpetual, but in vain. Still round him clung invisibly a chain which galled forever, fettering though unseen, and heavy though it clanked not, worn with pain, which pined although it spoke not, and grew keen, entering with every step he took through many a scene. 10. Secure in guarded coldness, he had mixed again in fancied safety with his kind, and deemed his spirit now so firmly fixed and sheathed with an invulnerable mind, that if no joy, no sorrow lurked behind. And he, as one, might midst the many stand unheeded, searching through the crowd to find fit speculation, such as in strange land he found in wonder-works of God and nature's hand. 11. But who can view the ripened rose, nor seek to wear it? Who can curiously behold the smoothness and the sheen of beauty's cheek, nor feel the heart can never all grow old? Who can contemplate fame through clouds unfold the star which rises o'er her steep, nor climb? Harold, once more within the vortex rolled on with the giddy circle, chasing time, yet with a nobler aim than in his youth's fond prime. 12. But soon he knew himself the most unfit of men to herd with man, with whom he held little in common, untaught to submit his thoughts to others, though his soul was quelled, in youth by his own thoughts. Still uncompelled, he would not yield dominion of his mind to spirits against whom his own rebelled. Proud though in desolation, which could find a life within itself to breathe without mankind. 13. Where rose the mountains, there to him were friends; where rolled the ocean, thereon was his home; where a blue sky and glowing clime extends, he had the passion and the power to roam. The desert, forest, cavern, breakers' foam, were unto him companionship, they spake a mutual language, clearer than the tome of his land's tongue, which he would oft forsake for nature's pages glassed by sunbeams on the lake. 14. Like the Chaldean, he could watch the stars, till he had peopled them with beings bright as their own beams, and earth-born jars, and human frailties were forgotten quite. Could he have kept his spirit to that flight, he had been happy, but this clay will sink, its spark immortal, envying it the light to which it mounts, as if to break the link that keeps us from yon heaven which woos us to its brink. 15. But in man's dwellings he became a thing restless and worn, and stern and wearisome, drooped as a wild-born falcon with clipped wing, to whom the boundless air alone were home. Then came his fit again, which to o'ercome, as eagerly the barred-up bird will beat his breast and beak against his wiry dome, till the blood tinge his plumage, so the heat of his impeded soul would through his bosom eat. 16. Self-exiled Harold wanders forth again, with naught of hope left, but with less of gloom. The very knowledge that he lived in vain, that all was over on this side the tomb, had made despair a smilingness assume, which, though 'twere wild, as on the plundered wreck, when mariners would madly meet their doom with draughts intemperate on the sinking deck, did yet inspire a cheer which he forbore to check. 17. Stop! For thy tread is on an empire's dust, an earthquake's spoil is sepulchred below. Is the spot marked with no colossal bust, nor column trophied for triumphal show? None, but the moral's truth tells simpler so, as the ground was before, thus let it be. How that red rain hath made the harvest grow! And is this all the world has gained by thee, thou first and last of fields, king-making victory? 18. And Harold stands upon this place of skulls, the grave of France, the deadly Waterloo. How in an hour the power which gave annuls its gifts, transferring fame as fleeting too. In pride of place here last the eagle flew, then tore with bloody talon the rent plain, pierced by the shaft of banded nations through. Ambition's life and labours all were vain. He wears the shattered links of the world's broken chain. 19. Fit retribution. Gaul may champ the bit, and foam in fetters, but is earth more free? Did nations combat to make one submit, or league to teach all kings true sovereignty? What! Shall reviving thraldom again be the patched-up idol of enlightened days? Shall we, who struck the lion down, shall we pay the wolf homage, proffering lowly gaze, and servile knees to thrones? No, prove before ye praise. 20. If not, o'er one fallen despot boast no more. In vain fair cheeks were furrowed with hot tears For Europe's flowers long rooted up before The trampler of her vineyards; in vain years Of death, depopulation, bondage, fears, Have all been borne and broken by the accord Of roused up millions. All that most endears Glory, is when the myrtle wreathes a sword Such as Harmodius drew on Athens' tyrant lord. 21. There was a sound of revelry by night, And Belgium's capital had gathered then Her beauty and her chivalry, and bright The lamps shone o'er fair women and brave men. 1,000 hearts beat happily, and when Music arose with its voluptuous swell, Soft eyes looked love to eyes which spake again, And all went merry as a marriage bell. But hush! Hark! a deep sound strikes like a rising knell. 22. Did ye not hear it? No, 'twas but the wind, or the car rattling o'er the stony street. On with the dance! Let joy be unconfined. No sleep till morn, when youth and pleasure meet To chase the glowing hours with flying feet. But hark! that heavy sound breaks in once more, As if the clouds its echo would repeat, And nearer, clearer, deadlier than before. Arm! arm! it is the cannon's opening roar. 23. Within a windowed niche of that high hall Sat Brunswick's fated chieftain. He did hear That sound, the first amidst the festival, And caught its tone with death's prophetic ear. And when they smiled because he deemed it near, His heart more truly knew that peal too well Which stretched his father on a bloody bier, And roused the vengeance blood alone could quell. He rushed into the field, and foremost fighting, fell. 24. Ah! then and there was hurrying to and fro, And gathering tears, and tremblings of distress, And cheeks all pale, which but an hour ago Blushed at the praise of their own loveliness. And there were sudden partings, such as press The life from out young hearts, and choking sighs Which ne'er might be repeated. Who would guess If ever more should meet those mutual eyes, Since upon night so sweet such awful morn could rise? 25. And there was mounting in hot haste. The steed, the mustering squadron, and the clattering car, Went pouring forward with impetuous speed, And swiftly forming in the ranks of war. And the deep thunder peal on peal afar, And near the beat of the alarming drum Roused up the soldier ere the morning star, While thronged the citizens with terror dumb, Or whispering with white lips, "The foe! They come! They come!" 26. And wild and high the Camerons gathering rose, The war note of Lochiel, which Albin's hills Have heard, and heard too have her Saxon foes. How in the noon of night that pibroch thrills, Savage and shrill! But with the breath which fills their mountain pipe, so fill the mountaineers With the fierce native daring which instills The stirring memory of 1,000 years, And Evan's, Donald's fame rings in each clansman's ears. 27. And Ardennes waves above them her green leaves, Dewy with nature's teardrops as they pass, Grieving, if aught inanimate e'er grieves, O'er the unreturning brave. Alas! Ere evening to be trodden like the grass, Which now beneath them, but above shall grow In its next verdure, when this fiery mass Of living valour, rolling on the foe, And burning with high hope, shall moulder cold and low. 28. Last noon beheld them full of lusty life, Last eve in beauty's circle proudly gay. The midnight brought the signal, sound of strife, The morn the marshalling in arms, the day Battle's magnificently stern array. The thunder clouds close o'er it, which when rent The earth is covered thick with other clay, Which her own clay shall cover, heaped and pent, Rider and horse, friend, foe, in one red burial blent. 29. Their praise is hymned by loftier harps than mine, Yet one I would select from that proud throng, Partly because they blend me with his line, And partly that I did his sire some wrong, And partly that bright names will hallow song. And his was of the bravest, and when showered The death bolts deadliest the thinned files along, Even where the thickest of war's tempest lowered, They reached no nobler breast than thine, young gallant Howard. 30. There have been tears and breaking hearts for thee, and mine were nothing, had I such to give. But when I stood beneath the fresh green tree, which living waves where thou didst cease to live, and saw around me the wild field revive with fruits and fertile promise, and the spring come forth her work of gladness to contrive, with all her reckless birds upon the wing, I turned from all she brought to those she could not bring. 31. I turned to thee, to thousands, of whom each, and one as all, a ghastly gap did make In his own kind and kindred, whom to teach Forgetfulness were mercy for their sake. The archangel's trump, not glories, must awake Those whom they thirst for; though the sound of fame May for a moment soothe, it cannot slake The fever of vain longing, and the name So honoured, but assumes a stronger, bitterer claim. 32. They mourn, but smile at length, and smiling mourn. The tree will wither long before it fall. The hull drives on, though mast and sail be torn. The roof tree sinks, but moulders on the hall In massy hoariness. The ruined wall Stands when its wind-worn battlements are gone. The bars survive the captive they enthrall. The day drags through, though storms keep out the sun. And thus the heart will break, yet brokenly live on. 33. E'en as a broken mirror, which the glass In every fragment multiplies, and makes 1,000 images of one that was, The same, and still the more it breaks. And thus the heart will do which not forsakes, Living in shattered guise, and still, and cold, And bloodless, with its sleepless sorrow aches, Yet withers on till all without is old, Showing no visible sign, for such things are untold. 34. There is a very life in our despair, Vitality of poison, a quick root Which feeds these deadly branches, for it were As nothing did we die, but life will suit Itself to sorrow's most detested fruit. Like to the apples on the Dead Sea shore, All ashes to the taste, did man compute Existence by enjoyment, and count o'er Such hours 'gainst years of life, say, would he name 60? 35. The psalmist numbered out the years of man; they are enough, and if thy tale be true, thou, who didst grudge him e'en that fleeting span, more than enough, thou fatal Waterloo. Millions of tongues record thee, and anew their children's lips shall echo them, and say, Here, where the sword-united nations drew, our countrymen were warring on that day. And this is much, and all which will not pass away. 36. There sunk the greatest, nor the worst of men, whose spirit antithetically mixed One moment of the mightiest, and again On little objects with like firmness fixed. Extreme in all things, hadst thou been betwixt, Thy throne had still been thine, or never been. For daring made thy rise as fall, thou seek'st Even now to reassume the imperial mien, And shake again the world, the thunderer of the scene. 37. Conqueror and captive of the earth art thou. She trembles at thee still, and thy wild name Was ne'er more bruited in men's minds than now That thou art nothing, save the jest of fame, Who wooed thee once, thy vassal, and became The flatterer of thy fierceness, till thou wert A god unto thyself, nor less the same To the astounded kingdoms all inert, Who deemed thee for a time whate'er thou didst assert. 38. O more or less than man, in high or low, Battling with nations, flying from the field, Now making monarchs' necks thy footstool, now More than thy meanest soldier taught to yield. An empire thou couldst crush, command, rebuild, But govern not thy pettiest passion, nor, However deeply in men's spirits skilled, Look through thine own, nor curb the lust of war, Nor learn that tempted fate will leave the loftiest star. 39. Yet well thy soul hath brooked the turning tide With that untaught innate philosophy, Which, be it wisdom, coldness, or deep pride, Is gall and wormwood to an enemy. When the whole host of hatred stood hard by, To watch and mock thee shrinking, thou hast smiled With a sedate and all-enduring eye. When Fortune fled her spoiled and favourite child, He stood unbowed beneath the ills upon him piled. 40. sager than in thy fortunes, for in them ambition steeled thee on too far to show that just habitual scorn, which could contemn men and their thoughts. 'Twas wise to feel, not so to wear it ever on thy lip and brow, and spurn the instruments thou wert to use, till they were turned unto thine overthrow. 'Tis but a worthless world to win or lose, so hath it proved to thee, and all such lot who choose. 41. If like a tower upon a headland rock thou hadst been made to stand or fall alone, such scorn of man had helped to brave the shock. But men's thoughts were the steps which paved thy throne, their admiration thy best weapon shone. The part of Philip's son was thine, not then, unless aside thy purple had been thrown, like stern Diogenes to mock at men. For sceptred cynics earth were far too wide a den. 42. But quiet to quick bosoms is a hell, and there hath been thy bane. There is a fire and motion of the soul which will not dwell in its own narrow being, but aspire beyond the fitting medium of desire. And, but once kindled, quenchless evermore, preys upon high adventure, nor can tire of aught but rest. A fever at the core, fatal to him who bears, to all who ever bore. 43. This makes the madmen who have made men mad by their contagion, conquerors and kings, founders of sects and systems, to whom add sophists, bards, statesmen, all unquiet things which stir too strongly the soul's secret springs, and are themselves the fools to those they fool. Envied, yet how unenviable! What stings are theirs! One breast laid open were a school, which would unteach mankind the lust to shine or rule. 44. Their breath is agitation, and their life a storm whereon they ride, to sink at last, and yet so nursed and bigoted to strife, that should their days, surviving perils past, melt to calm twilight, they feel overcast with sorrow and supineness, and so die. Even as a flame unfed, which runs to waste with its own flickering, or a sword laid by, which eats into itself, and rusts ingloriously. 45. He who ascends to mountain tops shall find the loftiest peaks most wrapped in clouds and snow. He who surpasses or subdues mankind must look down on the hate of those below. Though high above the sun of glory glow, and far beneath the earth and ocean spread, round him are icy rocks, and loudly blow contending tempests on his naked head, and thus reward the toils which to those summits led. 46. Away with these! True wisdom's world will be within its own creation, or in thine, maternal nature, for who teems like thee, thus on the banks of thy majestic Rhine? There Harold gazes on a work divine, a blending of all beauties, streams and dells, fruit, foliage, crag, wood, cornfield, mountain, vine, and chiefless castles breathing stern farewells from grey but leafy walls, where ruin greenly dwells. 47. And there they stand, as stands a lofty mind, worn, but unstooping to the baser crowd, all tenantless, save to the crannying wind, or holding dark communion with the cloud. There was a day when they were young and proud, banners on high, and battles passed below, but they who fought are in a bloody shroud, and those which waved a shredless dust ere now, and the bleak battlements shall bear no future blow. 48. Beneath these battlements, within those walls, Power dwelt amidst her passions. In proud state Each robber chief upheld his armoured halls, Doing his evil will, nor less elate Than mightier heroes of a longer date. What want these outlaws conquerors should have But history's purchased page, to call them great? A wider space, an ornamented grave? Their hopes were not less warm, their souls were full as brave. 49. In their baronial feuds and single fields, what deeds of prowess unrecorded died! And love, which lent a blazon to their shields, with emblems well devised by amorous pride, through all the mail of iron hearts would glide. But still their flame was fierceness, and drew on Keen contest and destruction near allied, and many a tower for some fair mischief won, Saw the discoloured Rhine beneath its ruin run. 50. But thou, exulting and abounding river, making thy waves a blessing as they flow, through banks whose beauty would endure for ever, could man but leave thy bright creation so, nor its fair promise from the surface mow with the sharp scythe of conflict, then to see thy valley of sweet waters were to know earth paved like heaven, and to seem such to me, even now what wants thy stream, that it should Lethe be. 51. 1,000 battles have assailed thy banks, but these and half their fame have passed away, and slaughter heaped on high his weltering ranks. Their very graves are gone, and what are they? Thy tide washed down the blood of yesterday, and all was stainless, and on thy clear stream glassed with its dancing light the sunny ray. But o'er the blackened memory's blighting dream thy waves would vainly roll, all sweeping as they seem. 52. Thus Harold inly said, and passed along, yet not insensible to all which here awoke the jocund birds to early song in glens which might have made in exile dear, though on his brow were graven lines austere, and tranquil sternness which had ta'en the place of feelings fiery afar but less severe. Joy was not always absent from his face, but o'er it in such scenes would steal with transient trace. 53. Nor was all love shut from him, though his days of passion had consumed themselves to dust. It is in vain that we would coldly gaze on such as smile upon us, the heart must leap kindly back to kindness, though disgust hath weaned it from all worldlings. Thus he felt, for there was soft remembrance, and sweet trust in one fond breast, to which his own would melt, and in its tenderer hour on that his bosom dwelt. 54. And he had learned to love, I know not why, for this in such as him seems strange of mood. The helpless looks of blooming infancy, even in its earliest nurture, what subdued, to change like this, a mind so far imbued with scorn of man, it little boots to know. But thus it was, and though in solitude small power the nipped affectations have to grow, in him this glowed when all beside had ceased to glow. 55. And there was one soft breast, as hath been said, which unto his was bound by stronger ties than the church links withal, and though unwed, that love was pure, and far above disguise, had stood the test of mortal enmities, still undivided, and cemented more by peril, dreaded most in female eyes. But this was firm, and from a foreign shore well to that heart might his these absent greetings pour. The castled crag of Drachenfels frowns o'er the wide and winding Rhine, whose breast of waters broadly swells between the banks which bear the vine, and hills all rich with blossomed trees, and fields which promise corn and wine, and scattered cities crowning these, whose far white walls along them shine, have strewed a scene which I should see with double joy wert thou with me. And peasant girls with deep blue eyes, and hands which offer early flowers, walk smiling o'er this paradise. Above, the frequent feudal towers through green leaves lift their walls of grey, and many a rock which steeply lowers, and noble arch in proud decay, look o'er this vale of vintage bowers. But one thing want these banks of Rhine, thy gentle hand to clasp in mine. I send the lilies given to me, though long before thy hand thy touch, I know that they must withered be, but yet reject them not as such. For I have cherished them as dear, because they yet may meet thine eye, and guide thy soul to mine e'en here, when thou behold'st them drooping nigh, and know'st them gathered by the Rhine, and offered from my heart to thine. The river nobly foams and flows, the charm of this enchanted ground, and all its thousand turns disclose some fresher beauty varying round. The haughtiest breast its wish might bound through life to dwell delighted here, nor could on earth a spot be found to nature and to me so dear, could thy dear eyes in following mine still sweeten more these banks of Rhine. 56. By Koblenz, on a rise of gentle ground, there is a small and simple pyramid, crowning the summit of the verdant mound. Beneath its base are heroes' ashes hid, our enemies, but let not that forbid Honour to Marceau, o'er whose early tomb tears, big tears, gushed from the rough soldier's lid, lamenting and yet envying such a doom, falling for France, whose rights he battled to resume. 57. Brief, brave, and glorious was his young career. His mourners were two hosts, his friends and foes, and fitly may the stranger lingering here pray for his gallant spirit's bright repose. For he was freedom's champion, one of those, the few in number, who had not o'erstept the charter to chastise which she bestows on such as wield her weapons. He had kept the whiteness of his soul, and thus men o'er him wept. 58. Here Ehrenbreitstein, with her shattered wall, black with the miner's blast, upon her height yet shows of what she was, when shell and ball rebounding idly on her strength did light. A tower of victory, from whence the flight of baffled foes was watched along the plain, but peace destroyed what war could never blight, and laid those proud roofs bare to summer's rain, on which the iron shower for years had poured in vain. 59. Adieu to thee, fair Rhine, how long delighted the stranger fain would linger on his way. Thine is a scene alike where souls united, or lonely contemplation thus might stray. And could the ceaseless vultures cease to prey on self-condemning bosoms, it were here, where nature, not too sombre nor too gay, wild but not rude, awful yet not austere, is to the mellow earth as autumn to the year. 60. Adieu to thee again, a vain adieu. There can be no farewell to scene like thine. The mind is coloured by thy every hue, and if reluctantly the eyes resign their cherished gaze upon thee, lovely Rhine, 'tis with the thankful glance of parting praise. More mighty spots may rise, more glaring shine, but none unite in one attaching maze the brilliant, fair, and soft, the glories of old days. 61. The negligently grand, the fruitful bloom Of coming ripeness, the white city's sheen, The rolling stream, the precipice's gloom, The forest's growth, and Gothic walls between, The wild rocks shaped as they had turrets been, In mockery of man's art, and these withal A race of faces happy as the scene, Whose fertile bounties here extend to all, Still springing o'er thy banks, though empires near them fall. 62. But these recede, above me are the Alps, the palaces of nature, whose vast walls Have pinnacled in clouds their snowy scalps, and throned eternity in icy halls Of cold sublimity, where forms and falls the avalanche, the thunderbolt of snow. All that expands the spirit, yet appalls, gathers around these summits, as to show How earth may pierce to heaven, yet leave vain man below. 63. But ere these matchless heights I dare to scan, there is a spot should not be passed in vain. Morat, the proud, the patriot field, where man may gaze on ghastly trophies of the slain, nor blush for those who conquered on that plain. Here Burgundy bequeathed his tombless host, a bony heap, through ages to remain, themselves their monument. The Stygian coast unsepulchred they roamed, and shrieked each wandering ghost. 64. While Waterloo with Canais's carnage vies, Morat and Marathon twin names shall stand. They were true glory's stainless victories, won by the unambitious heart and hand Of a proud, brotherly, and civic band, all unbought champions, in no princely cause Of vice entailed corruption, they no land doomed to bewail the blasphemy of laws Making kings' rights divine by some draconic clause. 65. By a lone wall a lonelier column rears A grey and grief-worn aspect of old days. 'Tis the last remnant of the wreck of years, And looks as with the wild bewildered gaze Of one to stone converted by amaze, Yet still with consciousness, and there it stands, Making a marvel that it not decays, When the coeval pride of human hands, Levelled Aventicum, hath strewed her subject lands. 66. And there, oh sweet and sacred be the name, Julia, the daughter, the devoted, gave Her youth to heaven, her heart, beneath a claim Nearest to heaven's, broke o'er a father's grave. Justice is sworn 'gainst tears, and hers would crave The life she lived in, but the judge was just, And then she died on him she could not save. Their tomb was simple and without a bust, and held within their urn one mind, one heart, one dust. 67. But these are deeds which should not pass away, and names that must not wither, though the earth forgets her empires with a just decay, the enslavers and the enslaved, their death and birth. The high, the mountain majesty of worth, should be, and shall, survivor of its woe, and from its immortality look forth, in the sun's face, like yonder alpine snow, imperishably pure beyond all things below. 68. Lake Leman woos me with its crystal face, the mirror where the stars and mountains view the stillness of their aspect in each trace, its clear depth yields of their far height and hue. There is too much of man here, to look through with a fit mind the might which I behold, but soon in me shall loneliness renew thoughts hid, but not less cherished than of old, ere mingling with the herd had penned me in their fold. 69. To fly from need not be to hate mankind. All are not fit with them to stir and toil, nor is it discontent to keep the mind deep in its fountain, lest it overboil in one hot throng, where we become the spoil of our infection, till too late and long we may deplore and struggle with the coil, in wretched interchange of wrong for wrong, midst a contentious world, striving where none are strong. 70. There, in a moment, we may plunge our years in fatal penitence, and in the blight of our own soul, turn all our blood to tears, and colour things to come with hues of night. The race of life becomes a hopeless flight to those that walk in darkness. On the sea the boldest steer, but where their ports invite. But there are wanderers o'er eternity, whose bark drives on, and anchored ne'er shall be. 71. Is it not better, then, to be alone, and love earth only for its earthly sake? By the blue rushing of the arrowy Rhone, or the pure bosom of its nursing lake, which feeds it as a mother who doth make a fair but froward infant her own care, kissing its cries away as these awake. Is it not better thus our lives to wear, than join the crushing crowd, doomed to inflict or bear? 72. I live not in myself, but I become portion of that around me, and to me high mountains are a feeling, but the hum of human cities torture. I can see nothing to loathe in nature, save to be a link reluctant in a fleshly chain, classed among creatures when the soul can flee, and with the sky, the peak, the heaving plain of ocean or the stars mingle, and not in vain. 73. And thus I am absorbed, and this is life. I look upon the peopled desert past, as on a place of agony and strife, where for some sin to sorrow I was cast, to act and suffer, but remount at last with a fresh pinion, which I felt to spring, though young, yet waxing vigorous as the blast which it would cope with, on delighted wing, spurning the clay-cold bonds which round our being cling. 74. And when at length the mind shall be all free from what it hates in this degraded form, reft of its carnal life, save what shall be existent happier in the fly and worm, when elements to elements conform, and dust is as it should be, shall I not feel all I see less dazzling but more warm? The bodiless thought, the spirit of each spot, of which even now I share at times the immortal lot. 75. Are not the mountains, waves, and skies a part of me and of my soul, as I of them? Is not the love of these deep in my heart, with a pure passion? Should I not contemn all objects, if compared with these, and stem a tide of suffering, rather than forego such feelings for the hard and worldly phlegm of those whose eyes are only turned below, gazing upon the ground, with thoughts which dare not glow? 76. But this is not my theme, and I return to that which is immediate, and require those who find contemplation in the urn to look on one whose dust was once all fire, a native of the land where I respire the clear air for a while, a passing guest, where he became a being, whose desire was to be glorious. 'Twas a foolish quest, the which to gain and keep he sacrificed all rest. 77. Here the self-torturing sophist, wild Rousseau, the apostle of affliction, he who threw enchantment over passion, and from woe wrung overwhelming eloquence, first drew the breath which made him wretched. Yet he knew how to make madness beautiful, and cast o'er erring deeds and thoughts a heavenly hue of words, like sunbeams, dazzling as they passed the eyes, which o'er them shed tears feelingly and fast. 78. His love was passion's essence, as a tree on fire by lightning, with ethereal flame kindled he was, and blasted, for to be thus and enamoured were in him the same. But his was not the love of living dame, nor of the dead who rise upon our dreams, but of ideal beauty, which became in him existence, and o'erflowing teems along his burning page, distempered though it seems. 79. This breathed itself to life in Julie, this invested her with all that's wild and sweet. This hallowed, too, the memorable kiss which every morn his fevered lip would greet, from hers, who but with friendship his would meet. But to that gentle touch, through brain and breast, flashed the thrilled spirit's love-devouring heat, in that absorbing sigh perchance more blest than vulgar minds may be with all they seek possessed. 80. His life was one long war with self-sought foes, or friends by him self-banished, for his mind had grown suspicion's sanctuary, and chose, for its own cruel sacrifice, the kind 'gainst whom he raged with fury strange and blind. But he was frenzied, wherefore, who may know? Since cause might be which skill could never find, but he was frenzied by disease or woe, to that worst pitch of all, which wears a reasoning show. 81. For then he was inspired, and from him came, as from the Pythian's mystic cave of yore, those oracles which set the world in flame, nor ceased to burn till kingdoms were no more. Did he not this for France, which lay before bowed to the inborn tyranny of years, broken and trembling to the yoke she bore, till by the voice of him and his compeers, roused up to too much wrath, which follows o'ergrown fears? 82. They made themselves a fearful monument, the wreck of old opinions, things which grew breathed from the birth of time. The veil they rent, and what behind it lay, all earth shall view. But good with ill they also overthrew, leaving but ruins, wherewith to rebuild upon the same foundation, and renew dungeons and thrones, which the same hour refilled, as heretofore, because ambition was self-willed. 83. But this will not endure, nor be endured. Mankind have felt their strength, and made it felt. They might have used it better, but, allured by their new vigour, sternly have they dealt on one another. Pity ceased to melt with her once natural charities, but they, who in oppression's darkness caved had dwelt, they were not eagles, nourished with the day. What marvel then, at times, if they mistook their prey? 84. What deep wounds ever closed without a scar? The heart's bleed longest, and but heal to wear that which disfigures it, and they who war with their own hopes, and have been vanquished, bear silence, but not submission. In his lair fixed passion holds his breath, until the hour which shall atone for years. None need despair. It came, it cometh, and will come, the power to punish or forgive. In one we shall be slower. 85. Clear, placid Leman, thy contrasted lake, with the wild world I dwelt in, is a thing which warns me with its stillness to forsake earth's troubled waters for a purer spring. This quiet sail is as a noiseless wing to waft me from distraction. Once I loved torn ocean's roar, but thy soft murmuring sounds sweet as if a sister's voice reproved, that I with stern delights should e'er have been so moved. 86. It is the hush of night, and all between thy margin and the mountains dusk, yet clear, mellowed and mingling, yet distinctly seen. Save darkened Jura, whose capped heights appear precipitously steep, and drawing near there breathes a living fragrance from the shore, of flowers yet fresh with childhood, on the ear drops the light drip of the suspended oar, or chirps the grasshopper one good-night carol more. 87. He is an evening reveller, who makes his life an infancy, and sings his fill. At intervals some bird from out the brakes starts into voice a moment, then is still. There seems a floating whisper on the hill, but that is fancy, for the starlight dews all silently their tears of love instil, weeping themselves away, till they infuse deep into nature's breast the spirit of her hues. 88. Ye stars, which are the poetry of heaven, if in your bright leaves we would read the fate of men and empires, 'tis to be forgiven that in our aspirations to be great, our destinies o'erleap their mortal state, and claim a kindred with you, for ye are a beauty and a mystery, and create in us such love and reverence from afar, that fortune, fame, power, life, have named themselves a star. 89. All heaven and earth are still, though not in sleep, but breathless, as we grow when feeling most, and silent as we stand in thoughts too deep. All heaven and earth are still, from the high host of stars to the lulled lake and mountain coast. All is concentered in a life intense, where not a beam, nor air, nor leaf is lost, but hath a part of being, and a sense of that which is of all creator and defence. 90. Then stirs the feeling infinite, so felt in solitude where we are least alone. A truth, which through our being then doth melt, and purifies from self. It is a tone, the soul and source of music, which makes known eternal harmony, and sheds a charm, like to the fabled Cytherea's zone, binding all things with beauty. 'Twould disarm the spectre Death, had he substantial power to harm. 91. Nor vainly did the early Persian make his altar the high places and the peak of earth o'ergazing mountains, and thus take a fit and unwalled temple, there to seek the spirit, in whose honour shrines are weak, upreared of human hands. Come and compare columns and idol dwellings, Goth or Greek, with nature's realms of worship, earth and air, nor fix on fond abodes to circumscribe thy prayer. 92. The sky is changed, and such a change! O night, and storm, and darkness, ye are wondrous strong, yet lovely in your strength, as is the light of a dark eye in woman. Far along, from peak to peak, the rattling crags among, leaps the live thunder, not from one lone cloud, but every mountain now hath found a tongue, and Jura answers, through her misty shroud, back to the joyous Alps, who call to her aloud. 93. And this is in the night, most glorious night, thou wert not sent for slumber, let me be a sharer in thy fierce and far delight, a portion of the tempest and of thee. How the lit lake shines, a phosphoric sea, and the big rain comes dancing to the earth, and now again 'tis black, and now the glee of the loud hills shakes with its mountain mirth, as if they did rejoice o'er a young earthquake's birth. 94. Now, where the swift Rhone cleaves his way between heights which appear as lovers who have parted in hate, whose mining depths so intervene, that they can meet no more, though broken-hearted. Though in their souls, which thus each other thwarted, love was the very root of the fond rage which blighted their life's bloom and then departed. Itself expired, but leaving them an age of years all winters, war within themselves to wage. 95. Now, where the quick Rhone thus hath cleft his way, the mightiest of the storms hath ta'en his stand, for here not one but many make their play, and fling their thunderbolts from hand to hand, flashing and cast around. Of all the band, the brightest through these parted hills hath forked his lightnings, as if he did understand that in such gaps as desolation worked, there the hot shaft should blast whatever therein lurked. 96. Sky, mountains, river, winds, lake, lightnings, ye with night and clouds and thunder, and a soul to make these felt and feeling, well may be things that have made me watchful. The far roll of your departing voices is the knoll of what in me is sleepless, if I rest. But where of ye, O tempests, is the goal? Are ye like those within the human breast? Or do ye find at length, like eagles, some high nest? 97. Could I embody and unbosom now that which is most within me, could I wreak my thoughts upon expression, and thus throw soul, heart, mind, passions, feelings, strong or weak, all that I would have sought, and all I seek, bear, know, feel, and yet breathe, into one word, and that one word were lightning, I would speak. But as it is, I live and die unheard, with a most voiceless thought, sheathing it as a sword. 98. The morn is up again, the dewy morn, with breath all incense, and with cheek all bloom, laughing the clouds away with playful scorn, and living as if earth contained no tomb, and glowing into day, we may resume the march of our existence, and thus I, still on thy shores, fair Le Mans, may find room and food for meditation, nor pass by much that may give us pause if pondered fittingly. 99. Clarens, sweet Clarens, birthplace of deep love, thine air is the young breath of passionate thought, thy trees take root in love. The snows above, the very glaciers, have his colours caught, and sunset into rose hues sees them wrought by rays which sleep there lovingly. The rocks, the permanent crags, tell here of love, who sought in them a refuge from the worldly shocks, which stir and sting the soul with hope that woos, then mocks. 100. Clarens, by heavenly feet thy paths are trod, undying loves, who here ascends a throne to which the steps are mountains, where the God is a pervading life and light, so shone not on those summits solely, nor alone in the still cave and forest, o'er the flower his eye is sparkling, and his breath hath blown, his soft and summer breath, whose tender power passes the strength of storms in their most desolate hour. 101. All things are here of him, from the black pines, which are his shade on high, and the loud roar of torrents where he listeneth, to the vines which slope his green path downward to the shore, where the bowed waters meet him, and adore, kissing his feet with murmurs. And the wood, the covert of old trees, with trunks all hoar, but light leaves, young as joy, stands where it stood, offering to him and his a populous solitude. 102. A populous solitude of bees and birds and fairy-formed and many-coloured things, who worship him with notes more sweet than words, and innocently open their glad wings, fearless and full of life, the gush of springs, and fall of lofty fountains, and the bend of stirring branches, and the bud which brings the swiftest thought of beauty, here extend, mingling and made by love, unto one mighty end. 103. He who hath loved not, here would learn that lore, and make his heart a spirit. He who knows that tender mystery will love the more, for this is love's recess, where vain men's woes, and the world's waste, have driven him far from those, for 'tis his nature to advance or die. He stands not still, but or decays, or grows into a boundless blessing, which may vie with the immortal lights in its eternity. 104. 'Twas not for fiction chose Rousseau this spot, peopling it with affections, but he found it was the scene which passion must allot to the mind's purified beings. 'Twas the ground where early love his psyche's zone unbound, and hallowed it with loveliness. 'Tis lone, and wonderful, and deep, and hath a sound, and sense, and sight of sweetness. Here the Rhone hath spread himself a couch, the Alps have reared a throne. 105. Lausanne and Ferney, ye have been the abodes of names which unto you bequeathed a name, mortals who sought and found by dangerous roads a path to perpetuity of fame. They were gigantic minds, and their steep aim was, Titan-like, on daring doubts to pile thoughts which should call down thunder, and the flame of heaven, again assailed, if heaven the while on man and man's research could deign do more than smile. 106. The one was fire and fickleness, a child, most mutable in wishes, but in mind a wit as various, gay, grave, sage or wild, historian, bard, philosopher combined. He multiplied himself among mankind, the Proteus of their talents, but his own breathed most in ridicule, which, as the wind, blew where it listed, laying all things prone. Now to o'erthrow a fool, and now to shake a throne. 107. The other, deep and slow, exhausting thought, and hiving wisdom with each studious year, in meditation dwelt, with learning wrought, and shaped his weapon with an edge severe, sapping a solemn creed with solemn sneer. the lord of irony, that master spell which stung his foes to wrath, which grew from fear, and doomed him to the zealot's ready hell, which answers to all doubts so eloquently well. 108. Yet peace be with their ashes, for by them, if merited, the penalty is paid. It is not ours to judge, far less condemn. The hour must come when such things shall be made known unto all, or hope and dread allayed by slumber on one pillow in the dust, which thus much we are sure must lie decayed. And when it shall revive, as is our trust, 'twill be to be forgiven, or suffer what is just. 109. But let me quit man's works, again to read His Maker's spread around me, and suspend this page, which from my reveries I feed, until it seems prolonging without end. The clouds above me to the white Alps tend, and I must pierce them, and survey whate'er may be permitted, as my steps I bend to their most great and growing region, where the earth to her embrace compels the powers of air. 110. Italia! To Italia! Looking on thee, full flashes on the soul the light of ages, since the fierce Carthaginian almost won thee, to the last halo of the chiefs and sages, who glorify thy consecrated pages. Thou wert the throne and grave of empires, still the fount at which the panting mind assuages her thirst of knowledge, quaffing there her fill, flows from the eternal source of Rome's imperial hill. 111. Thus far have I proceeded in a theme renewed with no kind auspices, to feel we are not what we have been, and to deem we are not what we should be, and to steel the heart against itself, and to conceal with a proud caution love or hate or aught, passion or feeling, purpose, grief or zeal, which is the tyrant spirit of our thought, is a stern task of soul. No matter, it is taught. 112. And for these words, thus woven into song, it may be that they are a harmless wile, the colouring of the scenes which fleet along, which I would seize, in passing, to beguile my breast, or that of others, for a while. Fame is the thirst of youth, but I am not so young as to regard men's frown or smile as loss or guerdon of a glorious lot. I stood and stand alone, remembered or forgot. 113. I have not loved the world, nor the world me. I have not flattered its rank breath, nor bowed to its idolatries a patient knee, nor coined my cheek to smiles, nor cried aloud in worship of an echo. In the crowd they could not deem me one of such. I stood among them, but not of them, in a shroud of thoughts which were not their thoughts, and still could, had I not filed my mind, which thus itself subdued. 114. I have not loved the world, nor the world me, but let us part fair foes. I do believe, though I have found them not, that there may be words which are things, hopes which will not deceive, and virtues which are merciful, nor weave snares for the falling. I would also deem, or others' griefs that some sincerely grieve, that two or one are almost what they seem, that goodness is no name, and happiness no dream. 115. My daughter, with thy name this song begun. My daughter, with thy name this much shall end. I see thee not, I hear thee not, but none can be so wrapt in thee. Thou art the friend to whom the shadows of far years extend. Albeit my brow thou never shouldst behold, my voice shall with thy future visions blend, and reach into thy heart when mine is cold. A token and a tone, even from thy father's mould. 116. To aid thy mind's development, to watch thy dawn of little joys, to sit and see almost thy very growth, to view thee catch knowledge of objects, wonders yet to thee, to hold thee lightly on a gentle knee, and print on thy soft cheek a parent's kiss. This, it should seem, was not reserved for me, yet this was in my nature, as it is, I know not what is there, yet something like to this. 117. Yet though dull hate as duty should be taught, I know that thou wilt love me, though my name should be shut from thee as a spell still fraught with desolation and a broken claim. Though the grave closed between us, 'twere the same, I know that thou wilt love me. Though to drain my blood from out thy being were an aim, and an attainment, all would be in vain, still thou wouldst love me, still that more than life retain. 118. The child of love, though born in bitterness, and nurtured in convulsion, of thy sire these were the elements, and thine no less. And yet such are around thee, but thy fire shall be more tempered, and thy hope far higher. Sweet be thy cradled slumbers. O'er the sea, and from the mountains where I now respire, fain would I waft such blessing upon thee, as with a sigh I deem thou mightst have been to me. End of section 3. Section 4 of Childe Harold's Pilgrimage by George Gordon Lord Byron. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Canto the 4th, Part 1. 1. I stood in Venice on the Bridge of Sighs, a palace and a prison on each hand. I saw from out the wave her structures rise, as from the stroke of the enchanter's wand. 1,000 years their cloudy wings expand around me, and a dying glory smiles o'er the far times when many a subject land looked to the winged lion's marble piles, where Venice sat in state, throned on her 100 isles. 2. She looks a sea Cybele, fresh from ocean, rising with her tiara of proud towers, at airy distance, with majestic motion, a ruler of the waters and their powers. And such she was. Her daughters had their dowers from spoils of nations, and the exhaustless East poured in her lap all gems in sparkling showers. In purple was she robed, and of her feast monarchs partook, and deemed their dignity increased. 3. In Venice Tasso's echoes are no more, and silent rose the songless gondolier. Her palaces are crumbling to the shore, and music meets not always now the ear. Those days are gone, but beauty still is here. States fall, arts fade, but nature doth not die, nor yet forget how Venice once was dear, the pleasant place of all festivity, the revel of the earth, the mask of Italy. 4. But unto us she hath a spell beyond her name in story, and her long array of mighty shadows, whose dim forms despond above the dogeless city's vanished sway. Ours is a trophy which will not decay with the Rialto. Shylock and the Moor and Pierre cannot be swept or worn away. The keystones of the arch, though all were o'er, for us repeopled were the solitary shore. 5. The beings of the mind are not of clay. Essentially immortal, they create and multiply in us a brighter ray and more beloved existence. That which fate prohibits to dull life, in this our state of mortal bondage, by these spirits supplied, first exiles, then replaces what we hate. Watering the heart, whose early flowers have died, and with a fresher growth replenishing the void. 6. Such is the refuge of our youth and age, the first from hope, the last from vacancy. And this worn feeling peoples many a page, and, may be, that which grows beneath mine eye. Yet there are things whose strong reality outshines our fairy land, in shape and hues more beautiful than our fantastic sky, and the strange constellations which the Muse o'er her wild universe is skilful to diffuse. 7. I saw or dreamed of such, but let them go. They came like truth and disappeared like dreams, and whatsoe'er they were, are now but so. I could replace them if I would. Still teems my mind with many a form which aptly seems such as I sought for, and at moments found. Let these too go, for waking reason deems such overweening fantasies unsound, and other voices speak, and other sights surround. 8. I've taught me other tongues, and in strange eyes have made me not a stranger. To the mind, which is itself, no changes bring surprise. Nor is it harsh to make, nor hard to find, a country with, or without mankind. Yet was I born where men are proud to be, not without cause, And should I leave behind the inviolate island of the sage and free, and seek me out a home by a remoter sea? 9. Perhaps I loved it well, and should I lay my ashes in a soil which is not mine, my spirit shall resume it, if we may, unbodied, choose a sanctuary. I twine my hopes of being remembered in my line with my land's language, if too fond and far these aspirations in their scope incline. If my fame should be, as my fortunes are, of hasty growth and blight, and dull oblivion bar. 10. My name from out the temple where the dead are honoured by the nations, let it be, and light the laurels on a loftier head, and be the Spartan's epitaph on me. Sparta hath many a worthier son than he. Meantime I seek no sympathies, nor need. The thorns which I have reaped are of the tree I planted, they have torn me, and I bleed. I should have known what fruit would spring from such a seed. 11. The spouseless Adriatic mourns her lord, and annual marriage now no more renewed, the Bucentaur lies rotting unrestored, neglected garment of her widowhood. St. Mark yet sees his lion where he stood stand, but in mockery of his withered power, over the proud place where an emperor sued, and monarchs gazed and envied in the hour when Venice was a queen with an unequalled dower. 12. The Suabian sued, and now the Austrian reigns. An emperor tramples where an emperor knelt. Kingdoms are shrunk to provinces, and chains clank over sceptred cities. Nations melt from power's high pinnacle, when they have felt the sunshine for a while, and downward go, like lauwine loosened from the mountain's belt. Oh, for 1 hour of blind old Dandolo, the octogenarian chief, Byzantium's conquering foe. 13. Before St. Mark still glow his steeds of brass, their gilded collars glittering in the sun. But is not Doria's menace come to pass? Are they not bridled? Venice, lost and won, her 1300 years of freedom done, sinks like a seaweed into whence she rose. Better be whelmed beneath the waves, and shun, even in destruction's depth, her foreign foes, from whom submission wrings an infamous repose. 14. In youth she was all glory, a new Tyre, her very byword sprung from victory, the planter of the lion, which through fire and blood she bore o'er subject earth and sea. Though making many slaves, herself still free, and Europe's bulwark 'gainst the Ottomite. Witness Troy's rival, Candia; vouch it, ye, immortal waves that saw Lepanto's fight, for ye are names no time nor tyranny can blight. 15. Statues of glass, all shivered, the long file of her dead doges are declined to dust. But where they dwelt, the vast and sumptuous pile bespeaks the pageant of their splendid trust. Their sceptre broken, and their sword in rust, have yielded to the stranger. Empty halls, thin streets, and foreign aspects, such as must too oft remind her who and what enthralls, have flung a desolate cloud o'er Venice's lovely walls. 16. When Athens' armies fell at Syracuse, and fettered thousands bore the yoke of war, Redemption rose up in the Attic muse, her voice their only ransom from afar. See, as they chant the tragic hymn, the car of the o'ermastered victor stops, the reins fall from his hands, his idle scimitar starts from its belt, he rends his captive's chains, and bids him thank the bard for freedom and his strains. 17. Thus, Venice, if no stronger claim were thine, were all thy proud historic deeds forgot, thy choral memory of the bard divine, thy love of Tasso, should have cut the knot which ties thee to thy tyrants, and thy lot is shameful to the nations. Most of all, Albion, to thee, the ocean queen should not abandon ocean's children. In the fall of Venice think of thine, despite thy watery wall. 18. I loved her from my boyhood. She to me was as a fairy city of the heart, rising like water columns from the sea. Of joy the sojourn, and of wealth the mart, And Otway, Radcliffe, Schiller, Shakespeare's art, Had stamped her image in me, and e'en so, Although I found her thus, we did not part, Perchance e'en dearer in her day of woe, Than when she was a boast, a marvel, and a show. 19. I can repeople with the past, and of the present there is still for eye and thought, and meditation chastened down, enough; and more, it may be, than I hoped or sought. And of the happiest moments which were wrought Within the web of my existence, some from thee, fair Venice, have their colours caught. There are some feelings time cannot benumb, nor torture shake, or mine would now be cold and dumb. 20. But from their nature will the tannin grow loftiest on loftiest and least sheltered rocks, rooted in barrenness, where naught below of soil supports them 'gainst the alpine shocks Of eddying storms, yet springs the trunk and mocks the howling tempest, till its height and frame Are worthy of the mountains from whose blocks Of bleak, grey granite into life it came, And grew a giant tree. The mind may grow the same. 21. Existence may be born, and the deep root Of life and sufferance make its firm abode In bare and desolate bosoms. Mute the camel labours with the heaviest load, And the wolf dies in silence. Not bestowed In vain should such examples be, if they, Things of ignoble or of savage mood, Endure and shrink not, we of nobler clay May temper it to bear. It is but for a day. 22. All suffering doth destroy, or is destroyed Even by the sufferer, and in each event Ends. Some, with hope replenished and rebuoyed, Return to whence they came, with like intent, And weave their web again. Some, bowed and bent, Wax grey and ghastly, withering ere their time, And perish with the reed on which they leant. Some seek devotion, toil, war, good or crime, According as their souls were formed to sink or climb. 23. But ever and anon of griefs subdued There comes a token like a scorpion's sting, Scarce seen, but with fresh bitterness imbued, And slight withal may be the things which bring Back on the heart the weight which it would fling Aside for ever. It may be a sound, a tone of music, summer's eve, or spring, A flower, the wind, the ocean, which shall wound, Striking the electric chain wherewith we are darkly bound. 24. And how and why we know not, nor can trace Home to its cloud this lightning of the mind, But feel the shock renewed, nor can efface The blight and blackening which it leaves behind; Which out of things familiar, undesigned, When least we deem of such, calls up to view The spectres whom no exorcism can bind, The cold, the changed, perchance the dead, anew, The mourned, the loved, the lost, too many, yet how few. 25. But my soul wanders, I demand it back To meditate amongst decay, and stand A ruin amidst ruins, there to track Fallen states and buried greatness, or a land Which was the mightiest in its old command, And is the loveliest, and must ever be The master mould of nature's heavenly hand, Wherein were cast the heroic and the free, The beautiful, the brave, the lords of earth and sea. 26. The commonwealth of kings, the men of Rome, And even since and now, fair Italy, Thou art the garden of the world, the home Of all art yields, and nature can decree. Even in thy desert, what is like to thee? Thy very weeds are beautiful, thy waste More rich than other climes' fertility, Thy wreck a glory, and thy ruin graced With an immaculate charm which cannot be defaced. 27. The moon is up, and yet it is not night. Sunset divides the sky with her, a sea Of glory streams along the Alpine height Of blue Friuli's mountains. Heaven is free from clouds, but of all colours seems to be, Melted to one vast iris of the west, Where the day joins the past eternity; While on the other hand meek Dian's crest Floats through the azure air, an island of the blest. 28. A single star is at her side, and reigns With her o'er half the lovely heaven, but still Yon sunny sea heaves brightly, and remains Rolled o'er the peak of the far Rhaetian hill, As day and night contending were, until Nature reclaimed her order, gently flows The deep-dyed Brenta, where their hues instil The odorous purple of a new-born rose, Which streams upon her stream, and glassed within it glows. 29. Filled with the face of heaven, which from afar comes down upon the waters, all its hues, from the rich sunset to the rising star, their magical variety diffuse. And now they change, a paler shadow strews its mantle o'er the mountains, parting day dies like the dolphin, whom each pang imbues with a new colour as it gasps away, the last still loveliest, till 'tis gone, and all is grey. 30. There is a tomb in Arqua, reared in air, pillared in their sarcophagus, repose the bones of Laura's lover. Here repair many familiar with his well-sung woes, the pilgrims of his genius. He arose to raise a language, and his land reclaim from the dull yoke of her barbaric foes. Watering the tree which bears his lady's name, with his melodious tears he gave himself to fame. 31. They keep his dust in Arqua, where he died, the mountain village where his latter days went down the vale of years, and 'tis their pride, an honest pride, and let it be their praise, to offer to the passing stranger's gaze his mansion and his sepulchre, both plain and venerably simple, such as raise a feeling more accordant with his strain, than if a pyramid formed his monumental fane. 32. And the soft quiet hamlet where he dwelt is one of that complexion which seems made for those who their mortality have felt, and sought a refuge from their hopes decayed in the deep umbrage of a green hill's shade, which shows a distant prospect far away of busy cities, now in vain displayed, for they can lure no further, and the ray of a bright sun can make sufficient holiday. 33. Developing the mountains, leaves and flowers, and shining in the brawling brook, whereby, clear as its current, glide the sauntering hours with a calm languor, which, though to the eye heedless it seem, hath its morality. If from society we learn to live, 'tis solitude should teach us how to die. It hath no flatterers, vanity can give no hollow aid, alone man with his God must strive. 34. Or it may be with demons, who impair the strength of better thoughts, and seek their prey in melancholy bosoms, such as were of moody texture from their earliest day, and loved to dwell in darkness and dismay, deeming themselves predestined to a doom which is not of the pangs that pass away, making the sun like blood, the earth a tomb, the tomb a hell, and hell itself a murkier gloom. 35. Ferrara, in thy wide and grass-grown streets, whose symmetry was not for solitude, there seems as 'twere a curse upon the seats of former sovereigns, and the antique brood of Este, which for many an age made good its strength within thy walls, and was of yore patron or tyrant, as the changing mood of petty power impelled, of those who wore the wreath which Dante's brow alone had worn before. 36. And Tasso is their glory and their shame. Hark to his strain, and then survey his cell, and see how dearly earned Torquato's fame, and where Alfonso bade his poet dwell. The miserable despot could not quell the insulted mind he sought to quench, and blend with the surrounding maniacs in the hell where he had plunged it. Glory without end scattered the clouds away, and on that name attend. 37. The tears and praises of all time, while thine would rot in its oblivion, in the sink of worthless dust, which from thy boasted line is shaken into nothing, but the link thou formest in his fortunes bids us think of thy poor malice, naming thee with scorn. Alfonso, how thy ducal pageants shrink from thee, if in another station born, scarce fit to be the slave of him thou madest to mourn. 38. Thou, formed to eat and be despised and die, even as the beasts that perish, save that thou hadst a more splendid trough and wider sty. He, with a glory round his furrowed brow, which emanated then and dazzles now in face of all his foes, the Cruscan choir, and Boileau, whose rash envy could allow no strain which shamed his country's creaking lyre, that whetstone of the teeth, monotony in wire. 39. Peace to Torquato's injured shade! 'Twas his, in life and death, to be the mark where wrong aimed with their poisoned arrows, but to miss. O victor unsurpassed in modern song! Each year brings forth its millions, but how long the tide of generations shall roll on, and not the whole combined and countless throng compose a mind like thine, though all in one condensed their scattered rays, they would not form a sun. 40. Great as thou art, yet paralleled by those thy countrymen before thee born to shine, the bards of hell and chivalry. First rose the Tuscan father's comedy divine. Then, not unequal to the Florentine, the southern Scot, the minstrel, who called forth a new creation with his magic line, and like the Ariosto of the north, sang lady love and war, romance and knightly worth. 41. The lightning rent from Ariosto's bust the iron crown of laurel's mimicked leaves, nor was the ominous element unjust, for the true laurel wreath which glory weaves is of the tree no bolt of thunder cleaves. Yet the false semblance but disgraced his brow. Yet still, if fondly superstition grieves, know that the lightning sanctifies below whate'er it strikes. Yon head is doubly sacred now. 42. Italia, O Italia, thou who hast the fatal gift of beauty, which became a funeral dower of present woes and past, on thy sweet brow is sorrow ploughed by shame, and annals graved in characters of flame. O God, that thou wert in thy nakedness less lovely or more powerful, and couldst claim thy right, and awe the robbers back, who press to shed thy blood and drink the tears of thy distress. 43. Then mightst thou more appall, or less desired, be homely and be peaceful, undeplored for thy destructive charms. Then still untired would not be seen the armed torrents poured down the deep Alps, nor would the hostile horde of many nationed spoilers from the Po quaff blood and water, nor the stranger's sword be thy sad weapon of defence, and so, victor or vanquished, thou the slave of friend or foe. 44. Wandering in youth, I traced the path of him, the Roman friend of Rome's least mortal mind, the friend of Tully. As my bark did skim the bright blue waters with a fanning wind, came Megara before me, and behind Aegina lay, Piraeus on the right, Corinth on the left. I lay reclined along the prow, and saw all these unite in ruin, even as he had seen the desolate sight. 45. For time hath not rebuilt them, but upreared barbaric dwellings on their shattered site, which only make more mourned and more endeared the few last rays of their far scattered light, and the crushed relics of their vanished might. The Roman saw these tombs in his own age, these sepulchres of cities, which excite sad wonder, and his yet surviving page the moral lesson bears, drawn from such pilgrimage. 46. That page is now before me, and on mine his country's ruin added to the mass of perished states he mourned in their decline, and I in desolation. All that was of then destruction is, and now, alas, Rome, Rome imperial, bows her to the storm, in the same dust and blackness, and we pass the skeleton of her titanic form, wrecks of another world, whose ashes still are warm. 47. Yet, Italy, through every other land thy wrongs should ring, and shall, from side to side. Mother of arts, as once of arms, thy hand was then our guardian, and is still our guide. Parent of our religion, whom the wide nations have knelt to for the keys of heaven. Europe, repentant of her parricide, shall yet redeem thee, and, all backward driven, roll the barbarian tide, and sue to be forgiven. 48. But Arno wins us to the fair white walls, where the Etrurian Athens claims and keeps a softer feeling for her fairy halls. Girt by her theatre of hills, she reaps her corn and wine and oil, and plenty leaps to laughing life with her redundant horn. Along the banks where smiling Arno sweeps was modern luxury of commerce born, and buried learning rose, redeemed to a new morn. 49. There too the goddess loves in stone, and fills the air around with beauty. We inhale the ambrosial aspect, which, beheld, instills part of its immortality. The veil of heaven is half undrawn, within the pale we stand, and in that form and face behold what mind can make, when nature's self would fail. And to the fond idolaters of old envy the innate flash which such a soul could mould. 50. We gaze and turn away, and know not where, dazzled and drunk with beauty, till the heart reels with its fullness. There, forever there, chained to the chariot of triumphal art, we stand as captives, and would not depart. Away! There need no words, nor terms precise, the paltry jargon of the marble mart, where pedantry gulls folly. We have eyes. Blood, pulse, and breast confirm the Dardan shepherd's prize. 51. Appearedst thou not to Paris in this guise, or to more deeply blest Anchises, or, in all thy perfect goddess-ship, when lies before thee thy own vanquished lord of war? And gazing in thy face as toward a star, laid on thy lap, his eyes to thee upturn, feeding on thy sweet cheek, while thy lips are with lava kisses melting while they burn, showered on his eyelids, brow, and mouth, as from an urn. 52. Glowing and circumfused in speechless love, their full divinity inadequate that feeling to express or to improve, the gods become as mortals, and man's fate has moments like their brightest, but the weight of earth recoils upon us. Let it go. We can recall such visions, and create, from what has been, or might be, things which grow into thy statue's form, and look like gods below. 53. I leave to learned fingers and wise hands the artist and his ape, to teach and tell how well his connoisseurship understands the graceful bend and the voluptuous swell. Let these describe the undescribable. I would not their vile breath should crisp the stream wherein that image shall forever dwell, the unruffled mirror of the loveliest dream that ever left the sky on the deep soul to beam. 54. In Santa Croce's holy precincts lie ashes which make it holier, dust which is e'en in itself an immortality, though there were nothing save the past, and this the particle of those sublimities which have relapsed to chaos. Here repose Angelo's, Alfieri's bones, and his, the starry Galileo, with his woes. Here Machiavelli's earth returned to whence it rose. 55. These are four minds which, like the elements, might furnish forth creation, Italy. Time, which hath wronged thee with 10,000 rents of thine imperial garment, shall deny, and hath denied, to every other sky, spirits which soar from ruin. Thy decay is still impregnate with divinity, which gilds it with revivifying ray, such as the great of yore, Canova is today. 56. But where repose the all Etruscan three, Dante and Petrarch, and scarce less than they, the bard of prose, creative spirit, he of the 100 tales of love, where did they lay their bones, distinguished from our common clay in death as life? Are they resolved to dust, and have their country's marbles naught to say? Could not her quarries furnish forth one bust? Did they not to her breast their filial earth entrust? 57. Ungrateful Florence, Dante sleeps afar like Scipio, buried by the upbraiding shore. Thy factions, in their worse than civil war, proscribed the bard whose name for evermore their children's children would in vain adore, with the remorse of ages. And the crown, which Petrarch's laureate brow supremely wore, upon a far and foreign soil had grown, his life, his fame, his grave, though rifled, not thine own. 58. Boccaccio to his parent earth bequeathed his dust, and lies it not her great among, with many a sweet and solemn requiem breathed o'er him who formed the Tuscan siren tongue? That music in itself, whose sounds are song, the poetry of speech? No, even his tomb, uptorn, must bear the hyena bigot's wrong, no more amidst the meaner dead find room, nor claim a passing sigh, because it told for whom? 59. And Santa Croce wants their mighty dust, yet for this want more noted, as of yore the Caesar's pageant, shorn of Brutus's bust, did but of Rome's best son remind her more. Happier Ravenna, on thy hoary shore, fortress of falling empire, honoured sleeps the immortal exile, Arqua too, her store of tuneful relics proudly claims and keeps, while Florence vainly begs her banished dead, and weeps. 60. What is her pyramid of precious stones, of porphyry, jasper, agate, and all hues of gem and marble, to encrust the bones of merchant dukes, the momentary dews, which, sparkling to the twilight stars, infuse freshness in the green turf that wraps the dead, whose names are mausoleums of the Muse, are gently pressed with far more reverent tread than ever paced the slab which paves the princely head. 61. There be more things to greet the heart and eyes in Arno's dome of art's most princely shrine, where sculpture with her rainbow sister vies. There be more marvels yet, but not for mine, for I have been accustomed to entwine my thoughts with nature rather in the fields than art in galleries. Though a work divine calls for my spirit's homage, yet it yields less than it feels, because the weapon which it wields. 62. Is of another temper, and I roam by Thrasymeni's lake, in the defiles fatal to Roman rashness, more at home. For there the Carthaginian's warlike wiles come back before me, as his skill beguiles the host between the mountains and the shore, where courage falls in her despairing files, and torrents, swoln to rivers with their gore, reek through the sultry plain, with legions scattered o'er. 63. Like to a forest felled by mountain winds, and such the storm of battle on this day, and such the frenzy whose convulsion blinds to all save carnage, that, beneath the fray, an earthquake reeled unheededly away. None felt stern nature rocking at his feet, and yawning forth a grave for those who lay upon their bucklers for a winding sheet. Such is the absorbing hate when warring nations meet. 64. The earth to them was as a rolling bark, which bore them to eternity. They saw the ocean round, but had no time to mark the motions of their vessel. Nature's law, in them suspended, recked not of the awe which reigns when mountains tremble, and the birds plunge in the clouds for refuge, and withdraw from their down-toppling nests, and bellowing herds stumble o'er heaving plains, and man's dread hath no words. 65. Far other seen is Thrasymene now, her lake a sheet of silver, and her plain rent by no ravage save the gentle plough. Her aged trees rise thick as once the slain lay where their roots are, but a brook hath ta'en, a little rill of scanty stream and bed, a name of blood from that day's sanguine rain, and Sanguinetto tells ye where the dead made the earth wet and turned the unwilling waters red. 66. But thou, Clitumnus, in thy sweetest wave of the most living crystal that was e'er the haunt of river nymph, to gaze and lave her limbs where nothing hid them, thou dost rear thy grassy banks whereon the milk-white steer grazes, the purest god of gentle waters, and most serene of aspect, and most clear. Surely that stream was unprofaned by slaughters, a mirror and a bath for beauty's youngest daughters. 67. And on thy happy shore a temple still, of small and delicate proportion, keeps, upon a mild declivity of hill, its memory of thee. Beneath it sweeps thy current's calmness, oft from out it leaps the finny darter with the glittering scales, who dwells and revels in thy glassy deeps, while chance some scattered water-lily sails down where the shallower wave still tells its bubbling tales. 68. Pass not unblessed the genius of the place. If through the air a zephyr more serene win to the brow, 'tis his, and if ye trace along his margin a more eloquent green, if on the heart the freshness of the scene sprinkle its coolness, and from the dry dust of weary life a moment lave it clean with nature's baptism, 'tis to him ye must pay orisons for this suspension of disgust. 69. The roar of waters! From the headlong height Velino cleaves the wave-worn precipice, the fall of waters, rapid as the light the flashing mass foams shaking the abyss, the hell of waters, where they howl and hiss and boil in endless torture, while the sweat of their great agony, wrung out from this their phlegethon, curls round the rocks of jet that gird the gulf around, in pitiless horror set. 70. And mounts in spray the skies, and thence again returns in an unceasing shower, which round, with its unemptied cloud of gentle rain, is an eternal April to the ground, making it all one emerald. How profound the gulf, and how the giant element from rock to rock leaps with delirious bound, crushing the cliffs, which, downward worn and rent with his fierce footsteps, yield in chasms a fearful vent. 71. To the broad column which rolls on, and shows more like the fountain of an infant sea torn from the womb of mountains by the throes of a new world, than only thus to be parent of rivers, which flow gushingly, with many windings through the vale, look back, lo, where it comes like an eternity, as if to sweep down all things in its track, charming the eye with dread, a matchless cataract. 72. Horribly beautiful, but on the verge, from side to side, beneath the glittering morn, an iris sits, amidst the infernal surge, like hope upon a deathbed, and, unworn, its steady dies, while all around is torn by the distracted waters, bears serene its brilliant hues with all their beams unshorn. Resembling, mid the torture of the scene, love watching madness with unalterable mien. 73. Once more upon the woody Apennine, the infant Alps, which, had I not before gazed on their mightier parents, where the pine sits on more shaggy summits, and where roar the thundering Lauwein, might be worshipped more. But I have seen the soaring Jungfrau rear her never-trodden snow, and seen the hoar glaciers of bleak Mont Blanc both far and near, and in Chimari heard the thunder hills of fear. 74. The Acroceronian mountains of old name, and on Parnassus seen the eagles fly, like spirits of the spot, as 'twere for fame, for still they soared unutterably high. I've looked on Ida with a Trojan's eye, Athos, Olympus, Etna, Atlas, made these hills seem things of lesser dignity, all save the lone Soracte's height displayed, not now in snow, which asks the lyric Roman's aid. 75. For our remembrance, and from out the plain, heaves like a long-swept wave about to break, and on the curl hangs pausing, not in vain may he who will his recollections rake, and quote in classic raptures, and awake the hills with Latian echoes. I abhorred too much, to conquer for the poet's sake, the drilled dull lesson, forced down word by word, in my repugnant youth, with pleasure to record. 76. Aught that recalls the daily drug which turned my sickening memory, and though time hath taught my mind to meditate what then it learned, yet such the fixed inveteracy wrought by the impatience of my early thought, that, with the freshness wearing out before my mind could relish what it might have sought, if free to choose, I cannot now restore its health, but what it then detested still abhor. 77. Then farewell, Horace, whom I hated so, not for thy faults, but mine. It is a curse to understand, not feel, thy lyric flow, to comprehend, but never love thy verse, although no deeper moralist rehearse our little life, nor bard prescribe his art, nor livelier satirist the conscience pierce, awakening without wounding the touched heart. Yet fare thee well, upon Soracte's ridge we part. 78. O Rome, my country, city of the soul, the orphans of the heart must turn to thee, lone mother of dead empires, and control in their shut breasts their petty misery. What are our woes and sufferance? Come and see the cypress, hear the owl, and plod your way o'er steps of broken thrones and temples, ye, whose agonies are evils of a day. A world is at our feet as fragile as our clay. 79. The Niobe of nations, there she stands, childless and crownless, in her voiceless woe, an empty urn within her withered hands, whose holy dust was scattered long ago. The Scipio's tomb contains no ashes now. The very sepulchres lie tenantless of their heroic dwellers. Dost thou flow, old Tiber, through a marble wilderness? Rise with thy yellow waves, and mantle her distress. 80. The Goth, the Christian, time, war, flood, and fire have dwelt upon the seven-hilled city's pride. She saw her glories star by star expire, and up the steep barbarian monarchs ride, where the car climbed the Capitol, far and wide, temple and tower went down, nor left a site. Chaos of ruins! Who shall trace the void, o'er the dim fragments cast a lunar light, and say, here was, or is, where all is doubly night. 81. The double night of ages, and of her, night's daughter, ignorance hath wrapped and wrap all around us. We but feel our way to err. The ocean hath its chart, the stars their map, and knowledge spreads them on her ample lap. But Rome is as the desert where we steer, stumbling o'er recollections. Now we clap our hands and cry, Eureka! It is clear, when but some false mirage of ruin rises near. 82. Alas, the lofty city, and alas, the trebly 100 triumphs, and the day when Brutus made the dagger's edge surpass the conqueror's sword in bearing fame away. Alas for Tully's voice, and Virgil's lay, and Livy's pictured page, but these shall be her resurrection, all beside decay. Alas for earth, for never shall we see that brightness in her eye she bore when Rome was free. 83. O thou whose chariot rolled on fortune's wheel, triumphant Scylla, thou who didst subdue thy country's foes ere thou wouldst pause to feel the wrath of thy own wrongs, or reap the dew of hoarded vengeance till thine eagles flew o'er prostrate Asia, thou who with thy frown annihilated senates, Roman too, with all thy vices, for thou didst lay down with an atoning smile a more than earthly crown. 84. The dictatorial wreath, couldst thou divine to what would one day dwindle that which made thee more than mortal, and that so supine by aught than Romans Rome should thus be laid? She who was named eternal, and arrayed her warriors but to conquer, she who veiled earth with her haughty shadow, and displayed, until the o'er-canopied horizon failed, her rushing wings, oh, she who was almighty hailed! 85. Scylla was first of victors, but our own, the sagest of usurpers, Cromwell, he, too, swept off senates while he hewed the throne down to a block. Immortal rebel, see what crimes it costs to be a moment free and famous through all ages, but beneath his fate the moral lurks of destiny. His day of double victory and death beheld him win 2 realms, and happier yield his breath. 86. The third of the same moon whose former course had all but crowned him, on the self-same day deposed him gently from his throne of force, and laid him with the earth's preceding clay. And showed not fortune thus how fame and sway, and all we deem delightful, and consume our souls to compass through each arduous way, are in her eyes less happy than the tomb? Were they but so in man's, how different were his doom! 87. And thou, dread statue, yet existent in the austerest form of naked majesty, thou who beheldest, mid the assassin's din, at thy bathed base the bloody Caesar lie, folding his robe in dying dignity, an offering to thine altar from the queen of gods and men, great Nemesis, did he die, and thou, too, perish, Pompey? Have ye been victors of countless kings, or puppets of a scene? 88. And thou, the thunder-stricken nurse of Rome, she-wolf, whose brazen-imaged dugs impart the milk of conquest yet within the dome, where, as a monument of antique art, thou standest, mother of the mighty heart, which the great founder sucked from thy wild teat, scorched by the Roman Jove's ethereal dart, and thy limbs blacked with lightning, dost thou yet guard thine immortal cubs, nor thy fond charge forget? 89. Thou dost, but all thy foster babes are dead, the men of iron, and the world hath reared cities from out their sepulchres, men bled in imitation of the things they feared, and fought and conquered, and the same course steered at apish distance, but as yet none have, nor could the same supremacy have neared, save one vain man, who is not in the grave, but, vanquished by himself, to his own slaves a slave. 90. The fool of false dominion, and a kind of bastard Caesar, following him of old, with steps unequal, for the Roman's mind was modelled in a less terrestrial mould, with passions fiercer, yet a judgment cold, and an immortal instinct which redeemed the frailties of a heart so soft yet bold. Alcides with the distaff now he seemed at Cleopatra's feet, and now himself he beamed. 91. And came, and saw, and conquered, but the man who would have tamed his eagles down to flee, like a trained falcon in the Gallic van, which he, in sooth, long led to victory, with a deaf heart which never seemed to be a listener to itself, was strangely framed, with but one weakest weakness, vanity. Coquettish in ambition, still he aimed at what? Can he avouch or answer what he claimed? 92. And would be all or nothing, nor could wait for the sure grave to level him. Few years had fixed him with the Caesars in his fate, on whom we tread. For this the conqueror rears the arch of triumph, and for this the tears and blood of earth flow on as they have flowed, an universal deluge which appears without an ark for wretched man's abode, and ebbs but to reflow. Renew thy rainbow, God. 93. What from this barren being do we reap? Our senses narrow and our reason frail, life short and truth a gem which loves the deep, and all things weighed in custom's falsest scale. Opinion an omnipotence, whose veil mantles the earth with darkness, until right and wrong are accidents, and men grow pale, lest their own judgments should become too bright, and their free thoughts be crimes, and earth have too much light. 94. And thus they plod in sluggish misery, rotting from sire to son and age to age, proud of their trampled nature, and so die, bequeathing their hereditary rage to the new race of inborn slaves who wage war for their chains, and rather than be free, bleed gladiator-like, and still engage within the same arena where they see their fellows fall before, like leaves of the same tree. 95. I speak not of men's creeds, they rest between man and his Maker, but of things allowed, averred and known, and daily, hourly seen, the yoke that is upon us doubly bowed, and the intent of tyranny avowed, the edict of earth's rulers, who are grown the apes of him who humbled once the proud, and shook them from their slumbers on the throne. Too glorious, were this all his mighty arm had done. 96. Can tyrants but by tyrants conquered be, and freedom find no champion and no child, such as Columbia saw arise when she sprung forth a Pallas, armed and undefiled? Or must such minds be nourished in the wild, deep in the unpruned forest, midst the roar of cataracts, where nursing nature smiled on infant Washington? Has earth no more such seeds within her breast, or Europe no such shore? 97. But France got drunk with blood to vomit crime, and fatal have her Saturnalia been to freedom's cause, in every age and clime. Because the deadly days which we have seen, and vile ambition, that built up between man and his hopes an adamantine wall, and the base pageant last upon the scene, are grown the pretext for the eternal thrall which nips life's tree, and dooms man's worst, his second fall. 98. Yet freedom, yet thy banner, torn but flying, streams like the thunderstorm against the wind. Thy trumpet voice, though broken now and dying, the loudest still the tempest leaves behind. Thy tree hath lost its blossoms, and the rind, chopped by the axe, looks rough and little worth, but the sap lasts, and still the seed we find, sown deep, even in the bosom of the north. So shall a better spring less bitter fruit bring forth. End of Canto the Fourth, Part 1.